About 2 years ago, I was officially diagnosed with endometriosis, stage 4 endometriosis. This was after 3 surgeries that occurred over the course of about a year, where I had many doctors and surgeons trying to figure out what was going on with me and my ovaries. In the 3 years that kind of followed after my first surgery, so from my first surgery until now, it's been about 3 years. And I've watched so many videos online about women who have shared their stories about endometriosis and how they've got diagnosed and their journeys, but I've never quite found a story similar to mine. And this would have been really helpful for me when I was kind of going through the thick of all of this. So I decided to try to condense my story into 10 minutes and share it, though this may be much longer than 10 minutes. So to start, a little bit about me. My name is Naomi. I'm currently 29 years old and I live in Sheffield in the UK, but I'm originally from the US, hence my American accent. I moved to the UK in 2018 for my PhD. I'm an engineer and I wanted to go into nuclear engineering. So the bulk of this story really starts in July of 2023. So at the time, I was supposed to be finished my PhD, but I wasn't for a number of reasons, which I can talk about at another time. So I was looking for opportunities to make some money on the side because my funding was coming to an end. So one thing about me, I love teaching and I like working with young people. So there was an opportunity to do that in London with young people from all over the world, which just sounded like a really great opportunity for me. And I'd seen this opportunity before, but hadn't applied because of the timing and everything. But this year it worked out. So I applied for the role, got it, and I was headed to London. So I was packing to head to London and my body was just feeling off. I was having headaches and I actually thought that it might be a dental problem because I was experiencing headaches like I think it was on this side of my head, and I thought maybe I had a cavity that had gone rogue and was causing those headaches. So I had planned for an appointment with my dentist when I came back from this teaching opportunity, which was only meant to last like 3 weeks. So I'm packing to head to London and I'm experiencing these headaches and my body also feels hot. And I had a thermometer, so I took my temperature, and I think at the time my temperature was fine, but something told me I should take this thermometer just in case, and I can kind of monitor if I end up getting sick. This is also during COVID time, so of course everyone's worried about like spreading COVID and testing and all of that, and I of course tested myself for COVID and it came back negative. So I head to London for this opportunity, and as I'm taking the train down, I am just feeling like something is not right. I get to London, I move into my room, we start the training for the program, and my condition is just deteriorating. And now I'm having abdominal pain, I'm having hot flashes, and I'm beginning to register a temperature. So my temperature is elevated over several days. So after maybe, my temperature is elevated over a few days. So probably day 2 or 3 of my time in London, I end up going to the emergency room. So before this, I had gone to like see a doctor and they thought it was a UTI. Someone also thought it was COVID, so I took COVID tests. I was taking antibiotics for UTIs, and my condition was just deteriorating. So I went to the emergency room again, and this time they admitted me and they did a scan. And I remember the first thing that the nurse said when she saw my results, and she was sharing my results from my scan, she saw them and she said, "Where are your ovaries?" And even at that point I was kind of out of it, but I could kind of tell that something was not right there, because she could not see what she was hoping to see. So I ended up getting admitted to the hospital. This is still in London, the Whittington Hospital in London, and I ended up staying there for a couple of days, and they decided to have perform surgery on me because they found a cyst on my right ovary, and from the scans, I believe the cyst was measuring about 12 centimeters. And to help with telling the story, I've brought my handy dandy tape measure to show kind of what that looks like. So 12 centimeters is about this size, and that's the size of the cyst that they found on my ovary. So having a cyst on your ovary wouldn't necessarily cause all the symptoms that I was having, because I was having, signs of infection. And so what they found out was the ovarian cyst that I had was an endometrioma, and that endometrioma had become infected. And that infection was causing my headaches and my fever and the abdominal pain. I had nausea, I was struggling to eat, and I love to eat, so that was very uncharacteristic of me as well. And yeah, it turned out that I had an infected endometrioma, and the infection had kind of spread to my tubes, so they also would use the term like tubo-ovarian abscess. So I have my first ever surgery in a place that I'm not so familiar with because I'm not from London. I wasn't studying in London. And we go ahead, we have the surgery, all goes well. Because it's an emergency surgery, they don't actually remove the cyst, they just drain it. And I go on some antibiotics for a while, and after a few weeks, all is okay. So that's July 2023. That hospital, after they discharge me, they say you should come back in 6 weeks and we'll do a scan to check and see what's going on with your cyst and see if the situation has improved. So I go back in August, and I again go to I do an ultrasound at this time. And while they're doing the ultrasound, my ultrasound technician asks if I've had surgery already or if I'm going to have surgery, because from what she can see, it doesn't look like they did anything. Like, it looks like I still have an infected large endometrioma on my right side. And so I told her, like, oh, I had surgery 6 weeks ago, and she's like, okay. So they send those findings to the doctor and kind of arrange that, okay, at some point we're gonna need to remove the cyst itself, not just drain it, because obviously it's come back. But as here in the UK, we have a national healthcare system, and the timelines for these kinds of surgeries is quite long. So my doctor kind of warned me that it can be a long time before we're going to be able to schedule that surgery, because it would be considered elective. So in the UK, we have two kinds of surgeries. There's emergency surgery, and then there's elective surgery. So emergency surgery happens when it's an emergency. So typically, like, you're admitted to the ER and then they have to quickly do something. So that's what my first surgery was, where they drained my cyst. But this surgery, where they actually like plan it and schedule it, that would be an elective surgery. So they couldn't quite tell me when the elective surgery would happen, but there was an understanding that I would need to have that. Also to note, I had a Mirena Coil. So it's important to note this, because to this day, we don't really know what caused the infection. So of course they took samples from my cyst after my surgery in London, and they tested them, but they couldn't figure out what was causing the infection. And I had a Mirena Coil in, which is an IUD, and it's a hormonal IUD. They removed it during the surgery because they also thought that could possibly have been a source of the infection. So whenever, we have any kind of surgery on your abdomen, or if you have anything inserted into your uterus, that could be a time when an infection could, be introduced into your system. So they also tested the Mirena, I believe, but it's still inconclusive about what exactly caused the infections. And they tested me for a whole host of things. They tested me for STIs, and at one point later in the story, they tested me for even like tropical diseases, because I just come from Kenya, and still to this day, nobody knows what has caused the infections. So now it's August 2023. I've had my first surgery. I know I'm gonna have to have another surgery. But at the time, I'm just like kind of focused on, I need to finish this PhD, and then I can kind of sort out my life. So in September, I started feeling some symptoms again. Starting to feel the headaches again, the loss of appetite, and some abdominal pain. And the abdominal pain now was I think it was mainly on the left side, and the cyst was on the right. So I'm just feeling like I need to flag this to my doctors. So I went to my general practitioner, and they were like, okay, well, like, keep an eye on it. I think I did maybe like an iron blood test or something because I mentioned that I was tired, but nothing really came from that. So fast forward to December 2023, it's Christmas time, and I had booked tickets to go to Kenya. So I had booked these tickets at the beginning of the year, thinking that I would be finished with my PhD by then, and I would be able to enjoy a month in Kenya with my family. That became very clear as I got closer to the date that I would not be finished my PhD, so taking a month off wouldn't really make sense. So I had to shorten my trip because I still wanted to go. So I ended up shortening the trip to, I think, like a week or maybe a week and a half or something like that. So I ended up coming back, I think, the day before the new year. And 2 days before I came back, while I'm still in Kenya, I'm feeling rough. It's just like London all over again. I'm having fevers, I have abdominal pain, loss of appetite, and I'm like, this is not good. I need to go back home. So on the flight home, I remember just being in pure agony, and I couldn't eat anything. I was just in pain. I couldn't sleep. So as soon as I get back, me and my partner Victor, he takes me to the hospital in Sheffield. Because we decided to, he picked, I think what happened. I landed and then we went to Sheffield, which is where he lives. So in Sheffield, they think it's a UTI. Same case as Oxford. Again, they're like, okay, it's probably a UTI. They put me on antibiotics. I take the antibiotics. The case is not getting better. So at this point, I'm like, I think I should just go to Oxford because my doctors there are aware of the situation and maybe they'll be able to help me. So we take a grueling train ride from Sheffield to Oxford, and I go to the doctors there, and I go to the emergency room. They admit me, and they do an MRI scan, but they did not at the time go through the results of the MRI until after I end up having my second surgery. And also at the time there was a strike. Here in the UK, there are often strikes, and this was a strike with the hospital. So I think the staff was a bit low in numbers at the time. So I didn't hear any results from the MRI until much after everything kind of went down. So I have this MRI. They're putting me on antibiotics because they think at this point it's probably my cyst that has become infected again. They put me on antibiotics for a while. They're deciding if they're going to operate or not, and they decide that they are going to operate. So because it's an emergency surgery again, they just drain the cyst because I think sometimes with an emergency surgery, they try to be a bit more conservative, like they won't do more than they have to. And then the plan is for an elective surgery, they'll actually have everyone on board that they need to have on board and, do the adequate procedure that needs to be done. So they drain the cyst, they remove the infection. Again, they mention that it's like a tubo-ovarian abscess. So there's some involvement with my tubes. And important to note, through these two emergency surgeries, I don't lose any part of my reproductive system. I don't lose my ovaries. I don't lose my fallopian tubes. And that's quite remarkable because a lot of times when people have surgeries, even elective surgeries, they can lose an ovary or they can lose a tube. And through all of this, I still to this day, I have all of them intact. So I have that second surgery and I'm recovering from it. And at the time, so I'm in Oxford. I'm still trying to finish this PhD. I had a very supportive people around me during that time, which was very helpful. So I was working part-time at the Porter's Lodge in one of the colleges, like a security kind of job, very chill. And my team there was really supportive of me because I had to take, obviously, time off because I was in the hospital and all of this. And I had kind of just started the job. I just started in September, so I didn't have so much leave accumulated, but they were very supportive during that time. Also, my supervisors were very supportive. And one of my supervisors actually, I had a supervisor who was from Princeton, and he was able to help me kind of work out how I could get some funding to help with the rest of my PhD. So I had very, very supportive people with me during that time. Also friends and family, super, super supportive. During my first surgery, my friend Gloria, she let me stay at her house, and I remember the first time when I got home to our house and I ate some food, I just immediately vomited it because like my stomach just couldn't handle it. Like the nausea went crazy before and after these surgeries. And I'm not usually someone who does that. So it was kind of a very tricky time, but I had a lot of support. My friend Emily drove me back from the hospital from London to Oxford. Many of my friends came to visit me in the hospital. Maura, Sandra, Jelani, my boyfriend Victor. So many supportive people did so many things. I think Sandra was coordinating who would be able to help me with what, and yeah, so I felt very loved and supported during all of this. So then, fast forward to maybe February 2024. So I've had 2 surgeries now. They've both been emergency. They both were draining the cysts, and my doctor now is like, we should put you on birth control until we can schedule your elective surgery. We'll put you on the mini pill with the objective of stopping your period, because if we stop your period, maybe then the cysts will not grow as fast. They put me on the mini pill. It does not stop my period. So yeah, that was just, that did not do what it was intending to do, and the cyst continued to grow. So in February, my parents reach out and they say, we should think about having you have surgery in the States. So they decide to support me to come to the US and have surgery there with some doctors there at Mercy Medical Hospital in Baltimore. So I have a follow-up with them in, I think, March or April, and then I end up having my surgery there in May. So this put me on a very tight timeline with my PhD, because at this point I had done many extensions for my PhD, and I had come to the point where I was like, I cannot do these extensions anymore. I just need to finish this. So I had a deadline of like sometime in mid-April where I needed to submit my thesis. And so I decided I'm sticking to this because I had planned to have the surgery in May. And obviously I can't be writing my PhD while I'm having surgery. So it set me a kind of very hard and fast deadline about when I needed to finish this PhD so that I could kind of do these other things I needed to do. So I submitted my PhD in April, my thesis, and I had like about a week of freedom, chance to breathe, went to London, I was enjoying myself, and then came to the US to have surgery. So I had my pre-ops and then I had my surgery. Surgery went well. The doctor was able to remove, I had cysts on both ovaries. At the time, the cyst on the right ovary was 9 centimeters, so it wasn't yet at the full size that it was when I'd had my emergency surgeries, which was 12 centimeters, and it also wasn't infected yet. So he removes those cysts from my ovaries, and then removes any endometriosis that he sees. My ovaries were kissing, as they say, so they were like touching, and also they were, I think my colon was obstructing them. My colon was on top of them or something like that. So everything was just a mess. My pelvis was frozen, so nothing was moving. Everything was kind of adhered together with endometriosis tissue or scar tissue, and it was a bit of a mess. But that's where I actually got my diagnosis that I had endometriosis, stage 4 endometriosis, because in the emergency settings, they were not really trying to diagnose me with anything. They just kind of wanted to clear the infection. So when I would ask those doctors, like, what do you think is going on? They just didn't know. Another important thing to note at this time, when I had my surgery in Oxford and they decided to think about scheduling my elective surgery, they decided to do fertility testing. And they did a test called AMH, which is anti-mullary, I don't know what it stands for, but they test kind of your ovarian egg reserve. So they did that test because they wanted to understand if I should consider egg freezing before my surgery. So they do this test, and my results come back as 7.2 picomole per liter. I don't know what the units are, but I looked up the results later and saw that that was kind of an average median result for someone who was in their like early 40s, and I was 27. And so it's not out of, completely out of the ordinary for someone who's my age to have a low ovarian reserve, because if you look at like the distribution, there's maybe like a small percentage of the population, maybe less than 10%, that also have a low AMH score similar to mine at my age. But it did kind of indicate to me that, okay, if I want to have kids, I should start thinking about that, and I should start thinking about egg freezing and all that kind of stuff. But as I say, at the time, my main focus was I wanted to finish my PhD so that I could kind of move on with my life and get a job. And yeah. So while my doctors are having these conversations with me, and this actually even came up in London in my first surgery, they're saying, like, do you have kids? Do you want to have kids? These are questions I had not really seriously thought about because I was just focused on kind of finishing off school. And yeah, it's something that kind of now I'm starting to think more seriously about. So I had that third surgery in the US in 2024 May. It was a robotic surgery. And yeah, it went well. I recovered quite quickly from that surgery. Yeah, so fast forward to, I guess now, well, after that surgery, May 2024, in June, I defended my thesis. So actually exactly a month after my third surgery, I defended my thesis. So I flew back to Oxford, and the next day I defended it. Passed with minor corrections, did my corrections, enjoyed my life for a bit, and then started working. So I moved during this time to Sheffield. While I'm in Sheffield, I register with the doctor here, and I kind of tell them everything that's going on and mention my concerns to them. And my main concern at that point, and still to this date, is I want to prevent the infections. The endometriosis is, for me, a secondary concern, because the primary concern and the more kind of like life-threatening concern was when the cyst becomes infected, because then I end up having to have emergency surgery, and that's not something that is like sustainable. So I go to the doctor, I kind of explain the situation, and they say, okay, we should sign you up for a follow-up scan and just kind of see what's going on. And at the time I was having some symptoms, mainly like bowel symptoms, pain, and so I go for this scan in Sheffield, and they see that on my left and on my right, it seems that there's a cyst or a cystic-like structure that's about 4 centimeters. So my first cyst in London, 12 centimeters, and this cyst was 4.5 centimeters. So this was like good and bad news. So it was good news because it had been, how long? Like a year since my last surgery, and since my third surgery, it had been 1 year, and the cyst had not grown to 12 centimeters, which was good, because I was having these issues before where they would drain the cyst and then it would come back a few months later with a vengeance. So that had not happened to me, and the cyst itself was growing, but it was growing quite slowly, and I also wasn't on birth control or anything. So it was like, it seemed like I still had the endometriosis, and things were still stuck together, and my insides were still a mess, but the disease was progressing a bit slower. And that was because I actually had a doctor who went through and like removed everything that they could remove of the endometriosis. So I meet with the doctor in July of last year, 2025, and they tell me that I can either wait and see what happens, or I can schedule an elective surgery, and they will remove the cyst that they see and unstick my ovaries from my pelvis, and kind of clean up the endometriosis, because the endometriosis was back. But like I said, the endometriosis for me was more of a secondary concern. My main concern was, if there's a cyst that looks like it's infected, I wanted that out. When I'm going through the results with the doctor, they mentioned that one of the cysts looks like it could be infected. And so that to me alerted that, okay, I just want to get this removed, because it's better for me to have that removed in an elective setting where everyone's prepared for what's going on. I also have time to prepare, rather than waiting and seeing, and then eventually this infected cyst becomes a big issue and I end up in the ER. So they put me on the wait list for surgery, and yeah, I don't really hear much. So fast forward to last month. So I'm in Germany for a work meeting, and I'm getting these calls from a UK number. So I pick up, and it's a nurse from the endometriosis clinic in Sheffield, and they're saying, we have an opening for surgery in 2 weeks. Can you make it? So I'm like, oh my goodness, because actually I was meant to be in Texas in 2 weeks for a work conference. And actually at the time I was in Germany for a work conference. And so I was kind of like, oh my goodness, like I'll have to like really change my plans. And I was also planning to visit a friend in the US for her birthday. Um, yeah, so at first I told her like I need a few minutes to think about this and also to talk to my team at work to make sure like it's okay if I skip that meeting. So I take some time, I kind of think about it, and I tell her like, okay, yes, I'm gonna do the surgery. Also, I talked to my partner, and he was very like encouraging that I should take the opportunity. So I asked her if there was any chance we could push it a little further. She said, no, this is the only slot open. I guess that's how the NHS works. And this was, my first chance doing an elective surgery on the NHS. So this is my first kind of experience doing that. So I took the slot and did the pre-op assessment. Prepared for the surgery, and the surgery was now 2 weeks ago from the time that I'm recording this. So because I was having these like bowel symptoms, so my bowel symptoms were mainly that I was having painful bowel movements, and also they were bloody, and it was just different than the bowel movements that I'd had kind of before all of this began. And I was having pain in my ovaries. So I have my pre-ops, and then they tell me to do bowel prep before this surgery. So I'd never done bowel prep before any of my surgeries before. I mean, obviously 2 of them were emergency, so there was no prep of any form. But the surgery in the States, they didn't do bowel prep. So I did my first bowel prep. Bowel prep essentially is what people do usually when they're having like procedures that involve your colon. So for procedures like colonoscopies, they'll have you drink these fluids, and they will be used to clear you out. So that was an interesting experience. I probably should have taken that day off of work, but I did not, because I don't know, I didn't think it through fully, but yeah. That was a rough day. So I do the bowel prep, and then I have the surgery on a Friday morning. Because they thought that there could possibly be bowel involvement, they had planned for me to stay overnight if they needed to do anything with my bowels, and also if there was an infection, they would need to stay overnight and kind of monitor my infection levels. They planned for me to stay overnight, but I actually didn't need to because they didn't have to do any bowel surgery. They removed the cysts that they found. I haven't actually done the follow-up with them yet, so I don't know the whole of what happened, but from what they explained on the paperwork, they removed the cysts. There was kind of endometriosis in my uterosacral ligament. They removed that, they kind of treated the endometriosis. So when I had that meeting with that doctor, we were talking briefly before my surgery in Sheffield 2 weeks ago. They explained that my options moving forward were sort of, I can go on another form of birth control called Dionogest, something like that, which is an endometriosis specific form of birth control that can help to slow the growth of this endometriosis. They explained that was an option. And then I also asked them about if, kind of removing the ovaries altogether would help the situation, because I am kind of starting to think about if I want to have kids or not. And if I don't want to have kids, and if these ovaries are causing me to have surgery every couple of years, maybe it is better that they're not there. So I wanted to just ask and see like what that would look like. So he did mention that would probably help to prevent future surgeries, but you know, of course that's a permanent thing, and I would then, I think, go into menopause, so it's a big thing to consider. But yeah, we had the surgery, it went well, and now I'm 2 weeks post-op. I'm feeling a lot better and beginning to think about, you know, what the future kind of looks like. Do I want to freeze my eggs? Do I want to have kids? All of that. But yeah, that is kind of my story in a nutshell. And yeah, I just really wanted to share this story because I'd watched a lot of videos about people who had endometriosis, but I hadn't really come across many, or I think any videos where anyone had had endometriosis that had become infected. Yeah, so I probably missed a lot of stuff. It's kind of just an overview. Yeah, but hopefully this can help someone if they're going through something similar, to kind of understand what my case looked like. And yeah, that's it. So thanks for watching, and I know this video for a fact was more than 10 minutes, but hey ho. All right.